Hello, my name is Ryan Thomas, and I will be representing Team 5 with our Unit 5 Executive Summary presentation on the economic downturn and reform that affected both the United States and Chile. To begin with, we're going to cover three topics here. The first one being the United States, currently boasting a GDP of $21,482,000.41 billion. Chile, which has a GDP of $305.56 billion. And we'll be talking about the Great Recession and how it affected each of these countries and their global economies. The American recession can be broken down into several key components. The American recession took place between 2008. It really began in about December 2007, but went through 2009. It first began with the collapse of the mortgage securitization industry, which also caused the housing bubble collapse. Then we had the Lehman bankruptcy, which would be devastating as these financial institutions had at one point in time been deemed too big to fail. This bankruptcy actually happened on September 15th, 2008, smack dab right in the middle of the recession. Then we had the enormous amount of job loss that happened in not just the Americas but also in Chile. For example, in America, between the months of December 2007 and October 2009, more than 434,000 people were unemployed, bringing the unemployment rate in America to 10.1%. Two large shocks actually caused the Great Recession to be as bad as it was. Some experts believe that if these two shocks had not actually happened together, the recession would have been much more moderate and would have been easily handled by the government's institutions. These two shocks were the correction of an excess in housing stock that would cause the stock market to drop rapidly, coupled with a sharp increase in energy prices at the time. Looking at Chile, we can see how Chile's long term economic model would help it actually weather the effects of the recession better than most countries. Currently, Chile has a low inflation rate. It was 2% in 2013, and only off by 0.1% compared to the United States in 2017, showing that they have put a well balanced budget together that has allowed them to remain a global competitor. They also institute a floating exchange rate that allows for fast adjustments to monetary demand. They balance their monetary policy in order to weather not just the Great Recession, but any financial crisis that may arise. They also had no housing bubble. Much of the Chilean loans were actually spent on durable goods and not on homes. This prevented them from seeing such a housing burst like America did, modernizing their recession. They also are able to change their interest rates to asset costs, but this is only done when the economy is in danger and is not done willy nilly. Chilean people also faced higher costs because they were not massive price controls or government subsidies that would increase government spending. This was all in an effort to make sure that they kept a well balanced budget. And in the end, by reducing this government spending with less debt, they were able to keep inflation low. The impact on Chile, um, when compared to the United States, is that they had a much more moderate recession. Growth did slow, and the wage growth was flat. Citizens also experienced a slowing in savings and an increasing cost on spending on daily necessities, and costs added to exports is low in Chile. This hinders growth because the economy is not as service oriented or technologically advanced, so they're not making as much money when they're shipping stuff out and really needed to work on developing internally. The price of exports, many of which are commodities, remains low, maintaining demand and production in Chile. And Chile's economy was extremely resilient and recovered quickly. Today, they currently rank at 42nd in the world for global GDP. Economic reforms required three key components: the understanding that this was a global issue and that was experienced throughout the world, that there were multiple steps required to correct the recession, and that there were conditional factors that affected how the recession was handled. Global synchronization means that many countries felt the effects. While the United States may have been the first domino to fall, thus by falling they created a domino effect that would severely impact the economies of many countries. Jobs would have to return to their countries of origin And by doing this, they would address the unemployment issue that was rampant in all countries. The multiple steps that the American government took to help ease the recession back home was a stimulus package that helped bail out the financial institutions such as Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that had caused the housing burst, and they also focused on the reclamation of manufacturing jobs. Advanced technology had in fact accounted for 17% of the trade deficit in the United States up to this point. Then they had to look at capital controls because what ended up being the true savior of the recession was a steady injection of capital into the economy, but without sudden surges. Without having sudden surges, this prevented the inflation from running away, much like a runaway greenhouse effect, but instead with inflation, that prevented the economy from spiraling out of control and ending up to a situation much like is present in Venezuela today. We also had to look at some conditional factors. Countries that weathered the recession the best were those that had a budget surplus. This meant that they had not spent themselves into such huge amounts of debt, like America did, when compared to Chile, who had always kept a budget surplus. However, what allowed the United States to survive the economic recession was in fact their debt ceiling. The ability for them to take on more debt than, say, Chile can allows them to find the capital that they need to influx into the market immediately while worrying about a time to pay for it later. In conclusion, we learned several things from the Great Recession. We learned that there's a domino effect, that when global powers experience large periods of economic recession, it's going to affect other countries. We also learned that we could use the Great Depression as a model because we were able to find ways and theories and practices that would allow us to quickly make the adjustments to the economy that we needed to so that it didn't spiral completely down into a second Great Depression. And we learned that capital controls prove key, as these are the controls that allow the government to make those changes to the economy, thus saving capitalism as a viable source of business and productivity. This concludes our presentation. Here are some references for you guys to review, and I really encourage you to read our paper for a full overview of the entire economic recession. Thank you.